This is not going to be an announcement about U.S. ground troops. This is not the equivalent of the Iraq War. What this is similar to the kinds of counterterrorism campaigns that we've been engaging in consistently over the last 5, 6, 7 years.
From what the president will say to a nation and our allies about the terrorist killers to what the reaction will be from lawmakers and the voters, Barack Obama is facing a turning point in his presidency, the likes of which he hasn't been at the epicenter before. Let's get to it. Welcome back to MidPoint. Veteran political analyst, best-selling author, Dick Morris is here for his take on what's happening. So, Dick, we have to start right out with the president getting ready for Wednesday. What is it that you expect that he will talk about?
Well, he's got a delicate balancing act here because a large part of America is coming to the conclusion that he's too weak to be president. And this cuts across party lines. In the past, his negatives have all been among Republicans and independents, but he's held the Democrats. And now a lot of Democrats, particularly women, are worried about security, 9/11 coming up, and with ISIS raging all over the place and an open southern border, they're concerned. And I think he has to address that. On the other hand, he's got the Dubs in his own party who elected him to be against the Iraq war and to end the war. And they're not going to think kindly about what they might consider a descent into another cauldron. So it's a tough balancing act for him to do. And then he's got his own past to confront, where he previously minimized this threat and said they were the junior varsity, scoffed at them and said just because they have JV uniforms on doesn't mean that they're Kobe Bryant. And with that history of minimizing them until they became an explosive force like they are now, it's going to be very hard for him to do this.
Do you sense, and what you're getting then, perhaps a reticence from Democrats themselves, because certainly they're pulling away from the president in many things that he has done. They're trying to distance themselves with the midterms coming up. But do you sense the fact that they would almost go to the White House and say, we really don't want to do this, but we really have to because we have to succeed and we've got to at least have a chance come the midterms?
Yeah, I think that subtext is pretty evident, particularly when you come to the deportation executive orders, which he loudly trumpeted that he was going to do, and now he's loudly trumpeting that he's not going to do. One of the big problems that Obama has is that his base is so concentrated in cities and urban areas throughout the country, where he wins 80 or 90% of the vote, particularly in minority districts, that it's spread very thin across the rest of the country. And when you go to a state like Arkansas or Alaska or South Dakota or Montana or Iowa, where there's a relatively small minority population, he doesn't really have the votes to be able to dominate. And his Senate candidates are feeling that, and I think it's endangering his capacity to win a majority.
We're talking about $5 billion, apparently, is what he is going to ask for in order to fight ISIS. I guess two questions come to mind right away. Is there a thinking that that's going to be enough? And is this, in some ways, a blank check for the president now, knowing full well that you can set a time limit on this? You can say you'll be there for a year, 2 years, or even 3 years. But we all know the realities of war. It takes a lot more time and costs a lot more money than anybody ever predicts.
Yeah, $5 billion is ludicrous, and I think everybody knows that it is. It'll be much, much, much more than that. And as to the effort lasting years, he's already said this is going to be a 3-year effort. You see, his policy is that he blames his mistakes on the past administration, Bush, and he blames the things he can't finish, lays them over for the next administration to handle. So one way or another, he sheds himself of the blame. And he's really bequeathing the next administration a serious task. Let's realize that had he stayed in Iraq, this wouldn't have happened. Had he intervened in Syria, this wouldn't have happened. Had he intervened earlier in Iraq, this wouldn't have happened. But now, like an Ebola virus that nobody's paying attention to, it's spinning out of control, and it's going to require a major American commitment. And his concept of no boots on the ground also is ludicrous. We have 650 troops there right now. We're probably going to have to send more very soon. We know that the Iraqi army is pathetic. They couldn't stop ISIS. They just threw their guns away and ran away. And we know that there really is no force to stop ISIS. And while airstrikes can stop them in the desert, they can't do much about Fallujah or Mosul, where they're embedded in the cities, and they can't do much with urban guerrilla warfare. So I think that Obama's resolution of this crisis that he's going to announce tomorrow is half-hearted and won't really resolve it.
I guess that's part of the issue here then, because we're all thinking towards this. Everybody is now pointing towards this. The planet, actually, a lot of the allies are looking at it. Are we looking for too much at this point, knowing full well what this president has given us in recent months and recent years, how he has backed away from certain things, how he has made so many verbal mistakes in talking about this? You, of course, mentioned the fact the JV team, and then there's the no strategy, that perhaps we should temper a little bit of what we're expecting Wednesday night, because in essence it may be just a lot of numbers and a lot of rhetoric at the end of the day?
Well, if there's anybody who's waiting for tomorrow night to be a rallying cry and a strong national summons that kindles a national effort, they haven't been around for the last 6 years. That's not what this guy does. It's not where his heart is. And I think that the events, the consequences of the failures of his policy are now forcing him to change the policy. And he looks bad doing it, he's not good at it, and it's not consistent. 3 weeks ago, 54% of Americans wanted airstrikes in Iraq. Now 76% of Americans do. And Obama has to change his plans, his strategy, and his priorities to adjust to that, and it just is not his game.
Dick, what are you hearing then from people on the ground, lawmakers and your sources as well, regarding Syria? Because no matter what happens, sooner or later, if you want to go after ISIS, the feeling from the strategists is you must go into Syria and you have to do something. And there have been a number of articles that have talking about maybe getting in bed in a way with Assad and that regime itself. What do you hear as far as any sort of groundswell of support, negativity about what we need to do in Syria?
Well, I think there's the only groundswell is a feeling of acting against ISIS at the moment, but ultimately staying out. I think that we have to learn a lesson here. We toppled Mubarak, and we damn near had an Islamist regime. Fortunately, we continued to aid the military, and the Egyptians stayed a coup. We got rid of Gaddafi, and we got Benghazi, and we have a state now controlled by the Islamists. We got rid of Saddam Hussein, and now we have ISIS sweeping through Iraq. Get rid of Assad, and you can see what's going to happen there. These secular dictators, while they may not meet our definition of a democracy, are a lot better than Islamists who are bent on terrorism. We went through a period where we had monarchs that we set up in all these countries. And then we had secular dictators that we set up. And now we're abandoning that and turning it over to the Islamists, or popular will as we'd like to phrase it. And it's proving to be a catastrophe.
All right, some other numbers, and I want to go ahead and spin to what's happening in the Kentucky Senate right now, because we're going to show a couple of numbers here. And as the race engages here between Mitch McConnell and Allison Grimes, Grimes' numbers seem to be falling back to earth. There seemed to be at least some concern that Mitch McConnell was going to have a problem in Kentucky. Now it shows McConnell at about 47.2%, Grimes at about 42%. Is this really going to be any problem, or perhaps is Grimes just going to continue to fall here in Kentucky?
Yeah, I think McConnell's safe. You have 3 seats that the Republicans are certain to pick up: South Dakota, Montana, and West Virginia, where Democrats are retiring and there are no strong Democratic candidates. Then you have 2 seats the Democrats had hoped to take away: Georgia with Michelle Nunn, and Grimes in Kentucky. Both of those are falling out of reach for the Republicans, for the Democrats. The Republicans have 5- and 6-point margins, and I think those are moving away. The Republicans then need to pick up 3 other seats to get control. And 2 races are beginning to move decisively toward the Republicans: Arkansas and Alaska. In both cases, the Republican insurgent has leads of 5 or 6 points against an incumbent. And when an incumbent is under 50, most of the undecided goes against them anyway. That brings you up to 5 seats. Then to get the 6th seat, you have 2 races that are essentially tied: North Carolina and Iowa. And then you have slight Democratic leads in Michigan and Colorado, and somewhat more in New Hampshire. But all of those are really in play. But I think the news of the day is that we used to say we have 3 we can put in our pocket and 2 we're worried about takeaways. Now we might be getting to a point where we have 5 we can put in our pocket and not worry too much about the 2 takeaways.
Here come the midterms, and you and I and everybody here at Newsmax TV, we're going to be talking an awful lot in the next few weeks. Dick Morris, thank you so much again, my friend.
56 days.
We'll see you soon. Yep, there you go. Start the countdown. Thanks so much, Dick. All right, later on this hour, the social media lesson Republicans have been put on notice for years about and are still failing miserably at, despite the fact a 5-year-old could get it right. That and so much more in MidPoint, where we question everything.